talking about the various specializations in geography and what actually do psychologists do. Now, there are various names you might have heard. First is psychiatrist, and then you have psychologists. So let's first understand the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist. Psychiatrist is a person or a medical doctor who is specialized in treating psychological disorders by means of drugs or medicines. On the other hand, psychologist is a person with a PhD or a master's in psychology who tries to deal with psychological problems by means of therapeutic treatment or by means of functional treatments. Okay, so these psychologists usually do not prescribe drugs or medicines, but recently there has been a drastic change. People feel that the era of psychologists or the ambit of psychologists is decreasing because since they cannot prescribe drugs like medical doctors or psychiatrists, their influence or the importance is decreasing. But recently, US government has passed laws in 2 states. One is New Mexico and other is Louisiana. And in both these states, now psychologists can prescribe drugs after a requisite degree. Okay, so now psychologists are proven or are given rights to prescribe drugs similar to a psychiatrist. Okay, so you have psychiatrists, you have psychologists, then you have another group of people or set of people who are known as psychoanalysts. Psychoanalysts are again medical doctors, but they have a special degree or a special course in Freudian psychoanalysis. So they are medical doctors who can do psychoanalysis. And lastly, you have psychiatric social workers. These are medical doctors with a degree in MSW or Masters in Social Work. Okay, so these are the 4 broad categorizations which we need to understand before we start with the various core specializations in psychology. Now, when we talk about specializations in psychology, it must be very clear that there are 2 basic specializations that we come across. First is the specializations in basic fields, and second is the specializations in applied fields. Applied fields, I can say, for example, educational psychology, engineering psychology, environmental psychology. These all would fall under applied psychology. Okay, while biopsychology, clinical psychology, cognitive psychology are some of the basic fields of psychology. Okay, now let's understand these fields one by one. Biopsychology is a branch of psychology where we focus on brain, nervous system, and so on. Okay. Then you have clinical psychology. Clinical psychology, as we discussed, deals with mental disorders, okay, therapeutic approaches. Okay. Then you have cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology is a branch of psychology where we try to understand thinking, human behavior, and the thought process of an individual. You have community psychology. Community psychology basically deals with relations between you and your peer group, okay? Family relations, relations with peer groups. Then you have comparative psychology. It's a very important branch in psychology where most of the students get confused. It basically aims to do a comparative analysis between different species. So you have understanding of various species and the comparative analysis of the behavior of various species. Then you have consumer psychology, dealing with retail, marketing, consumer behavior, okay, their travel patterns, their choice of products, and so on. You have counseling psychology. Now, counseling psychology has a huge ambit. As a counselor, counseling psychology, you can do marriage counseling, you can do career counseling, okay, you can do family counseling, and so on. So it's basically providing guidance and training towards better relationship between either your married life, how to have a secure career, and so on. You have cultural psychology that mainly focuses on cultural norms and ethics, subcultures, and ethnicity. Then you have developmental psychology. It focuses on how an infant grows into toddler, then adolescence stage, adulthood, and a geriatric stage or a old stage. So from infant to toddler to young adult, and then geriatric or old population. Then you have educational psychology, mainly focusing on educational development, educational programs, morals, values, ethics. So it's basically focusing on educational programs. Then you have engineering psychology. This is again a branch of applied psychology, where you try to apply psychology to the field of computers, engineering, aerodynamics, okay, and so on. And finally, you have environmental psychology, where you focuses on urban crowd. Then you focus on noise, your surroundings, and so on. Okay. So these were some of the branches that we have discussed. Let's move on to the next set of branches here. In the next set of branches, we have evolutionary psychology. Now, evolutionary psychology talks about how human beings develop, or the evolution of human being. Okay, so how human being evolved as Homo sapiens, or the evolutionary pattern. So it includes Darwin's laws and so on. Okay, then you have forensic. This basically talks about crime detection, crime prevention, and rehabilitation of victims. Then you have gender psychology. It talks about gender identity, the various roles of males and females in day-to-day life, glass ceiling effect, okay, and basically preservation of gender identity. Then you have health psychology. It talks about good mental health and physical health. Okay, so the focus is mental health. You have the various disorders, schizophrenia, manic depressive, and so on. Okay, understanding of those disorders, the causes, symptoms, etiology, and treatment of the disorders. Now, the treatment would include both the role of psychologist and a psychiatrist, where you would be prescribing drugs, and the other would be providing counseling like family counseling, cultural counseling, and so on. Then you have industrial organizational psychology. Industrial organizational psychology basically deals with psychology in the field of industries. So you have job placements, okay. Then you have the marketing schemes for job recruitments. You have evaluation patterns for job, and then you have the organizational psychology, where you focus on ergonomics, okay, salary increments, job satisfaction, Then you have the traits of leadership and so on. Okay. Then you have learning psychology. Here we mainly focus on the various theories of learning. So it's a kind of basic field of psychology. You focus on classical conditioning, operant conditioning, Skinner's theory, insight theory, and so on. Then you have medical psychology, where you try to focus on medical aspects of treatment. So you have the various drugs, the addictions caused by the drugs, their treatment causations, and the pharmacology involved in these methods. Then you have personality psychology. You talk about various theories of personality, the types of personality, the various approaches to personality. So you have the type approach, trait approach, and so on. You have school psychology, where you focus on the curriculum, the school programs, the educational initiatives, and so on. Then you have sensation and perception psychology. This mainly talks about sensation, perception, how we perceive the society. So you have the Gestalt's view, that is included. Then you have the concept of psychophysics, that is included. We talk about the threshold, the absolute threshold, and so on. And finally you have the social psychology, where you talk about society as one. Okay. So you have interaction of human beings with other members of the society, the various social norms that have been set up, and the impacts of those social norms on the behavior of an individual. So these were the basic primary branches of psychology that we have talked about. Now let's discuss some more aspects on what do really psychologists do. Okay. So you have the various specialties of psychology that we have already discussed. Now here it's important from the point of view of objective type questions in the examination, which field of psychology is really highly important. So as we can see, you have the maximum weightage given to clinical psychology. Most of the people who enter into the branch of psychology go for clinical psychology. Okay. Then you have another major set of people working as counselors. A lot of people go into experiment and research. Okay, so these three I can say are the major specialties in psychology which attract most of the people when they enter into their masters or for PhD programs. Then you have other fields of psychology which are not so popular. These are school psychology, you have industrial psychology, social psychology, developmental, educational and health psychology, and all the rest of the branches that we have recently discussed falls in the category of others. Okay. So as we can see, most of the people plan to specialize in clinical psychology. You have a lot of people who are working as counselors, and then a large set of people who wish to go into the fields of experimental psychology. Okay. The next here is the activities involved. When you enter into a branch of psychology, what do you really do, or in which kind of activity you are involved? Since I said 49%, let's move on to the previous slide. As we can see here, 49% of the people are involved in clinical psychology and 10% in counseling. So we can say most of the people here in the psychology are involved in mental psychology or mental health services, and a large set of people are also involved in educational services. Okay, so as we can see, the maximum proportion goes for mental health services, and a large number of people are involved in educational services. So this includes counselor, school education, and the educational psychology, the three categories that we have previously talked about. So let me move on to the previous slide once more. So you have counseling, then you have a school, and then you have educational. So 3, 2 and 10, that forms nearly 15%, and then some from the others category. So you have a large set of people who are involved in educational and educational related services. Then, as we said, industrial psychology and organizational psychology and experimental psychology, which falls under the ambit of management and administration. Then you have a huge proportion of people which are involved in research activities or experimental psychology. A very less proportion of people are involved in applied psychology. So these are the various activities that usually a psychologist do once they enter into the field of psychology. Okay, and finally, we'll move on to the final slide there, that is, where do psychologists work? Now, most of the psychologists are involved with either private practice, so they work as clinical psychologists, so they usually prefer to do private practice either as counselors or as clinical psychologists. Then you have a lot of psychologists who are involved with researches in colleges and universities. So you have research and experimental psychology, that's the main focus. Then you have educational and school psychologists who are actively involved in colleges and universities. You have a lot of people who are associated to hospitals and clinics from the branches of clinical psychology. Okay. Then you have a lot of people who are involved in businesses. That's again nearly 12% in hospitals and 12% in businesses. So these are the people who are working with industrial and organizational psychology. A lot of people are actively involved in schools. And then you have a huge set of people who are working with human services. So with this we cover the basic specializations in psychology. What do psychologists really do? In the next sessions we would be talking about the biological basis of human behavior. We will be talking about the structure of brain and nervous system in further classes. So stay tuned for that. Till then, have a good day ahead.